I talk about workers being in a sea of disengagement and leaders standing up on the deck of a boat, yelling, why don't you get on that? Why don't you get back on the boat? You're drifting around in a sea of disengagement. And the people that are adrift actually wanting to be on the boat, but they're waiting for that lifeline of empathetic questions and understanding.
This is the Leaders Rising podcast, creating bigger futures, building thriving cultures. We believe you can become a leader worth following.
Tim, one of my favorite things to hear you talk about is one-liners that we all say all the time that actually come from sailing. If you could pick one to tell a leader today who you're just meeting on the street, what analogy would you use?
I would tell leaders they need to know what's going on below the waterline in their employees' lives, because so many times leaders just coexist with their teams at a surface level. They don't get to know them on a deep personal level, and they don't even get to know them on a deep professional level to know what truly drives the way they think and act within the organization. And oftentimes not knowing what's below the waterline can truly lead to disengagement. I talk about workers being in a sea of disengagement and leaders standing up on the deck of a boat, yelling, why don't you get on that? Why don't you get back on the boat? You're drifting around in a sea of disengagement. And the people that are adrift actually wanting to be on the boat, but they're waiting for that lifeline of empathetic questions and understanding that can lead to full engagement. And that's why I'm such a believer in the 5 voice assessment from Leaders Rising Network. That's why I encourage all my clients to do it, because it's a base point for them of understanding who their people are on present versus future orientation, time versus task. But it's a beginning. Leaders need to go deep. They need to know what their people are doing outside the place of business, what concerns are going on in their personal lives, so that they truly can lead well from a place of empathy.
I was with a few retired executives this morning, and one of them told a story that he had traded roles with somebody earlier in his career, executive roles, and he walked into the CEO's office one morning. He had just moved out of the CEO seat. They literally swapped. And he walked into the CEO's office on Monday morning and said, hey, how was your weekend? And he said, what, are you doing a survey?
Yeah.
And the CEO just wanted to get down to business. He was a task guy, get it done and move on. But that really isn't what makes people tick.
No.
And we are more human than just the work that we do every day.
Yeah. I had a great conversation. I posted something about getting below the waterline, and the example that I used with leaders that I work with, pitch our services to, is I show them this picture of a sailing vessel, Vestas Wind. It was a professionally sailed race boat in the Volvo Ocean Racing Series in 2014, multi-million-dollar boat, crewed by a professional crew. They had their GPS turned on, but they only had it turned on to see the overall race course, and they didn't have it tuned in to see how deep the water was below the boat. And they hit a reef in the middle of the Indian Ocean going 19 knots, or about 21 miles an hour. And it ripped a 15-foot hole in their multi-million-dollar race boat. And my conversation with leaders is, just like you can run a boat aground by not knowing what's below the waterline, you can run your organization aground and the lives of the people within your organizations if you don't take the time to get to know what's going on. Zach Mercurio, who writes for Harvard Business Review, wrote an article probably about 6 months ago in Harvard Business Review called The Power of Mattering at Work. And I commented on his post on LinkedIn. He commented on some of my stuff, and we were talking about what you talked about with asking the question of how was your weekend? And my comment to Zach was, I've seen so many leaders walk past dozens of people within their organization, looking at their phone, checking their email, walking by the people that literally have helped that business owner build that company, yet they're so focused on the next deal, the multi-million-dollar deal, that they forget all about the people and checking in with them. They hurry past them in an effort to do more. And Mercurio said this one-liner that I just love. He said, Tim, hurry and care can't coexist. And his point was to really have people understand that they matter. You have to take time with them.
Time is so important. It's a great opportunity to hear from our people, to learn about them. And, my tendency, talking about the 5 voices, is to get into the work and just do the thing. And so this group this morning had a few retired executives in it. And we were walking through the 5 voices. And my instinct is to just dive right in. Let's get started. Let's get to the good stuff. It took us 45 minutes to get to the beginning of the 5 voices because I asked them a question. Who are you and what do you do outside of work? Or in this case, the role that they have with this organization. They all had incredibly rich stories, which then gave me so much insight into how to talk, what things I could reference from their lives and experiences throughout the conversation that made it that much more impactful and wouldn't have happened if I had just gone right into the deep end and gotten started on the work. So it's truly an incredibly useful habit to get into.
Yeah, it's that old adage at work, right? People don't care how much you know until they know how much you care, right? And taking that time to, hey, how's your sick mom doing? Or how's that situation going with your son's school? All the difference in the world. I will tell the story of the very best leader I ever worked for, a former 3-star general in the United States Army. He was my CEO and president of the Lutheran Church Extension Fund when I was a district and regional vice president. I was one of probably 300 people at the time within the organization. I was one of 27 field people, 35 field people at the time, including support staff. And I would see the man probably at best 4 times a year. But every time I saw the man, he knew my kids' names, what they were doing in school, and what mattered. That same leader also taught me the importance of radical candor. We were driving between Milwaukee and the Wisconsin Dells area. He wanted me to take a senior vice president of marketing role and asked me on the drive, hey, if you're going to come down to St. Louis and take that job, you're going to have to form your own team. Who stays on the current team and who doesn't? And my answer included some of his very favorite people that I would ask to leave. So I asked the man, I said, how candid can I be? And he quickly told me, because as a former 3-star general, his cadence of communication was just like that, just like you see in a B-rated World War II movie. He said, well, Tim, let me tell you, we have a phrase in the military, lack of candor can kill. And he explained what that meant from a military standpoint, that innocent people can die without candor. And that blew me away, because there's not a whole lot of leaders in the world that can face radical candor, because they lack the self-awareness that Leaders Rising Network teaches through the Know Yourself to Lead Yourself model. They lack that self-awareness. And that leader, Merle Freytag was the man's name. He truly taught me that when you combine compassion with radical candor, you can get anything done in an organization you want.
That's a good word. So, Tim, take me back to your first experience stepping on a sailboat?
My first experience was in college. Went out with the UW Milwaukee Sailing Club. I don't even know what type of boat it was. I think it was a Soling, which was an Olympic race boat. And the boat heeled over, which is what people call tilting. You know, some people, non-sailors will say that boat's really tilting or leaning. Well, it's called heeling. The boat was heeled over, and I was actually on the low side of the boat, which means my back was like skimming the water, the waves of Lake Michigan, and a big wave went over me, and I was hooked. It was like flying on water, and took a little hiatus between college and actually taking time to really learn how to sail. But I've been sailing for 25 years, 26 years now, and just loving it.
So from that first sailing experience through your career and what you've learned along the way, what prompted you to step into this chapter and use sailing as a way to give a hands-on experience to leadership teams, executive teams, to know more about themselves and their work together?
Yeah. It started because I was sailing with a very ineffective race crew where the leader was a hard driver and his daughter was the first mate. And when those two would disagree, a culture of toxicity quickly grew on the race boat. Yet there were moments in time where the movement of the people on the boat, the movement of the boat through tacks and jibes and rounding the race course, it was almost like a symphony and well oiled. But progress on the race course was hampered by toxicity and culture. And I said to myself, wow, if only that ineffective business team could see what true teamwork is about from this race crew, that'd be awesome. And then I said, wow, if this race crew with the toxicity could learn from some good business models, that'd be awesome. And someone said, well, it sounds like you've got a product and a business to create. And so that's what happened. But one of the I think the important aspects of sailing that makes so much sense, and again, it's why a partnership or encouraging clients to use Leaders Rising Network makes so sense, is shared language in sailing is so important. If you don't know the shared language of sailing, you're not going to be safe, you're not going to be efficient, and you might actually be a danger to yourself and others. But the same thing exists in business. If they don't have a shared language, and the 5 Voices assessment provides a piece of shared language and culture, it's amazing what can be reinforced through a sailing experience once someone does coaching using 5 Voices. It kind of brings it all together. It's kind of a graduation ceremony.
I shared the support challenge matrix with this group this morning. And at the end of, a 15-minute introduction talking about how it applied to their team, I said, and here's the best part. We spent some time unpacking this and talking about the dynamics of this tool, but you guys now have 6 words that now mean something different in your vocabulary. And so that shared language, you're leaning over or the ship is heeling, mean describe similar things, but when everybody's saying the same word in the same way, it is so powerful. Take us through one of those experiences you've had with a team on the boat, and what was that experience like for them, and what did they take away from hitting the water?
Yeah. For one thing, getting used to getting out of their comfort zone. And you know what? A nurture guardian might say, I don't understand that connector or that pioneer. But if they realize that, hey, I have a discomfort with that relationship, that's a great starting point, right? So getting out on the water, breaking loose of that fear that keeps you tied to the dock, and actually getting out on the water. I tell execs that, hey, listen, if you have people on your staff that don't want to go out on the sailboat, that's fine. They can do something in a classroom while we're out sailing. But if you don't encourage that person to break out of their comfort zone, that person may also be the person that says, what do you mean we're going to change over to HubSpot from Salesforce? Or we're going to change payroll vendors. I'm comfortable with this payroll vendor, right? So breaking out of the comfort zone, first and foremost. The whole idea of that shared language. What's the tack versus a jibe? Holy smokes, we've got the same kind of thing in our client, or in our corporation. One of my favorite stories to tell is there was an architectural art firm that they design sculptures that are in hotel lobbies or airport terminals. The architects would design the structure. They'd take it to the art team. The art team would say, whoa, we can't do anything with that. The architects would say, well, why didn't you say something sooner? And the artist would say, well, we're not as smart as you. We can't give you that input. So, hey, go back to the drawing board. Well, going back to the drawing board costs time, and time is money. So this company was spinning in ineffectiveness because of poor communication. And so I taught them one of the rules that all captains, I'm licensed through the Coast Guard as a merchant mariner. We have to take the test, and we have to know rule number 5 in the collision regulation book, which says a vessel has to have a lookout at all times in all directions using all manners possible. All. Right. And I taught that team that in an organization, that rule has to be in existence at the same time. If you see something, say something. Got them out on the boat, had the artists take the helm first. And when they were asked to take the helm, they said, we've never driven a sailboat. We can't do that. We're not as smart as you. I said, hey, architects, what does that sound like? Well, that sounds like the same excuse they use in the organization. I'm like, awesome. Glad you caught that. The artist drove the sailboat, and they all did a fine job of driving the boat. When they got done, they went to sit up on the high side of the boat by the mast. Awesome place to watch the skyline of the city go past while we're sailing past it. Terrible place to sit, though, on a light wind day, and that's just what we had. We had really light winds. We were moving along, but since I race, I like to go as fast as I can on a sailboat. I'm like, hey, who wants to, have more fun and go faster? Everyone wanted to do that. So I asked the artist to move from the high side of the boat to the low side of the boat, which is where you want the weight on a low wind day. We picked up speed. Everyone was happy. When we got back to the shore, we did a little debrief about what stood out, and everyone was like, "Yep, see something, say something." And when I asked the artist to move from one side of the boat, they had this puzzled look, like, "Well, what's that going to do? What's that going to do?" And they saw that little idea, and they saw in their business that any little idea can have a big impact. They made some changes about how they monitor the system in the process. They went from having the aspiration of wanting to be the second largest architectural art firm in the country to actually becoming the second largest architectural art firm in the country because they improved their efficiencies in communication. So that was kind of like one of the most fun stories because it was so real and so live so fast. But I've had other stories, countless stories that would be worth telling at some time.
Take me through a few more examples. You said go below the waterline. What else do we say in regular everyday conversation that we don't realize comes from sailing?
Tons of stuff, right? And hold on to the bitter end. Bitter end is a sailing term. 3 sheets to the wind when we say someone's inebriated. That's a sailing term. There's so many things in the English language that we use, but what was really cool, taking the 5 voices in a very non-sailing world to a mission team in Mongolia that grew from 2 people to 6 people to 12 people, and from the 2 people not having many issues to the 12 people now having different personalities and not knowing how to truly relate to each other, especially under a conflict management, to take the 5 voices assessment to Mongolia, have it translated into 2 languages, actually 3 because we did one assessment in Russian, but have it translated into Kazakh, Mongolian, and Russian. And then have the leaders stop and say, my gosh, this guy's pushing us, not because he's doesn't think we have value, but that's just his pioneer nature. Wow. I never understood that. And having a leader who feels so frustrated because he's not, in his words, the huge driver or pioneer, but he's a nurturer, feeling bad that he's a nurturer, yet helping to understand that, have him understand that, one of the best descriptors, CEO, is using the acronym of Chief Encouragement Officer, and a nurturer providing that encouragement to the team. All of a sudden, that leader felt so much better about himself, and you could see the stress literally being lifted from his shoulders because he understood who he was as a leader and how he fit in. It was to say magical sounds too trite, but to listen to the aha moments that they had while I was doing the work with them based around 5 voices and the 5 dysfunctions of a team, it was amazing. It was truly amazing. And I did some follow-up with them yesterday, and they're still using, again, back to sailing, the shared language of, okay, as a driver, this is how I see this corporate value, collective value of our team. As a pioneer, I see it this way. As a connector, I see it this way. As a nurturer, I see it this way. I was getting like messages from team members that were not speaking at the time on WhatsApp saying, "Oh my gosh, this is groundbreaking." So it was really cool to see.
That's great to see that shared language cross-culturally, which I think goes to show for artists to have shared language and shared experience, and architects and international teams in Mongolia across multiple languages. Common language translates so well and helps us accomplish so much more together than we ever could apart.
Mm-hmm.
But a lot of us, it seems a lot of us have never been in that kind of environment. And so part of what I love about your sailing experiences that you're taking teams on is, hey, there is now a shared experience. It's not a collective experience of individuals all doing the same activity. We actually have to all work in tandem and translate that, debrief it. And in our work now, take something as a long development journey, but have a capstone kind of experience to put the icing on the cake and really show the growth and the development that the team's taken over time.
Yeah. Yeah. On a sailboat, I think it helps build perspective, because each job on a sailboat is just as important as the other. I mean, yes, you can't drive a boat, or you can't make a sailboat go unless there's somebody behind the wheel. Likewise, you can't trim the sails unless there's somebody in the cockpit, bringing in the sheets and trimming in the sails. There's got to be a bow person up front looking out for traffic and watching the trim of the sails. But the people that you see just riding along the edge, in air quotes, right, which we affectionately call rail meat as cockpit crew, the rail meat that are actually just acting, and I shouldn't even say just, who are acting as movable ballast, so to speak, are just as important as the people that are trimming the sails or driving the boat. So again, having people go through that experience of, wow, it's all perspective. We've recently even included now doing an experience in a karate dojo where people can understand just how important the basics are, the basics of, hey, take time out to get to know your people. Hey, get to know, is this person a nurture guardian? Are they a pioneer? What sets off a pioneer or a connector? Those basic elements of what we think are soft skills in business become so important, just as important as how I'm standing or I'm executing a block in self-defense or karate. And it just reinforces that whole shared language again experience.
That's great. Well, Tim, thanks so much for the conversation today. I'm excited for the ways we're collaborating, the ways you're leaning into our LRN team. We'll include links to connect with you on LinkedIn, follow along with what you're doing through Full Sail. You have no shortage of incredible insights from sailing and beyond that you share on LinkedIn. So I encourage everybody to follow you, connect with you there. We'll include a link to the 5 Voices assessment and a few of the other resources you've mentioned along the way. Appreciate the conversation.
Yeah, thanks, Aaron. Appreciate it.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the Leaders Rising Network podcast. Connect with us on LinkedIn or visit online at leadersrisingnetwork.com.